Over the past 5 years, global censorship has intensified. In the United States, immigration enforcement agents have arrested people for their public support of Palestine. Meanwhile, in China, the government has censored online dissent and arrested demonstrators for protesting against their COVID-19 policies. But this practice is far from new. The US and China have been censoring their citizens for decades, whether that be through McCarthyism in the 1950s, where people were forced to conform to the ideology of capitalism, or through one of the most violent revolutions in Chinese history, the Cultural Revolution.
Put you into prison and go to your home and search your home, burn all your books, and then drag you out in front of 1,000 people. People might spit on you, or people say bad words. Well, I guess many normal people can't tolerate that, and that's why lots of them committed suicide.
In 1966, Mao Zedong, in reaction to China trending further away from communism, launched China's Cultural Revolution. He united the Young Red Guards to purge China of all elements of pre-communist China, such as capitalist thinking, intellectualism, and traditional family structure, in an attempt to implement a unified ideology. This revolution promised to reform China by creating an egalitarian society. Mao's reaction to any perceived dissent was nationwide censorship. He used the authority of the state to ban many books and art and to silence dissent violently. While much of the suppression of everyday Chinese people stemmed from the state and was top-down, one of the most radical transformations of the Cultural Revolution was the extent to which it enacted censorship from the inside out. People censored each other and themselves out of fear. Rather than achieving real reform, the Cultural Revolution used censorship to cause lasting cultural and intellectual damage that continues to suppress political dissent, control the narrative through media, and maintain a consolidation of power. Mao Zedong's path to power explains why censorship became such a powerful weapon. Before Mao, China had been a highly unequal and aristocratic society, dealing with poverty, Japanese imperialism, and between 1927 and 1949, a civil war between the Chinese Communist Party and the Nationalist Party. When Mao led the Communist Party to victory in 1949, he established a one-party communist state founded on Maoism, an ideology of constant revolution and struggle. Mao proclaimed the end to China's embarrassment. "Ours will no longer be a nation subject to insult and humiliation," he said. "We have stood up." Mao was quick to reform Chinese society, mainly through the collectivization of land from landlords and its redistribution to peasants, resulting in an expanded economy and increased life expectancy by 1957. While these policies helped Mao gain support from peasants, they also encouraged violence. Up to 2 million landlords were killed. This precedent of violence was crucial because Maoism was based on ideological purity, causing dissenters to be suppressed rather than tolerated. With the death of Joseph Stalin in 1956, Mao felt he was losing control of China. The new Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev, called for de-Stalinization and condemned Stalin's purges and dictatorial method in a secret speech that Mao viewed as a dangerous betrayal of socialism. He feared China would follow the same path if criticism of leadership was permitted. Mao's fears deepened after some of his own policies, such as the production of food, began to fail. Mao thus launched the Great Leap Forward in 1958, an ambitious reform campaign intended to rapidly industrialize China. Officials were forced to meet impossible quotas, leading many to lie about their production data. When the government increased grain exports based on this false data, famine followed. Between 30 and 45 million people died. This catastrophe weakened Mao's authority, allowing leaders like Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping to introduce reforms such as private farming plots and grain imports. Mao criticized these changes as evidence of capitalist eroders and accused anyone who appeared to favor material gain as corrupting China. Mao thus reacted drastically to reassert his power. In 1966, Mao chose revolution again, this time attempting to change the values of Chinese culture itself. He focused on mobilizing the youth because they were more impressionable. He encouraged them to form Red Guard units and destroy the Four Olds. old customs, old culture, old habits, and old ideas. Students were urged to abandon classrooms to prove loyalty to Mao. Ray Yang, a former Red Guard, wrote, "It was Chairman Mao who set us free by allowing us to rebel," answering his call to combat the revisionist educational line by treating the sacred halo around teachers as a thing of the past. Teachers, writers, artists, and even family members were publicly denounced in violent struggle sessions, public spectacles of criticism and humiliation. Even Liu Xiaoqi, who was to be Mao's successor, was physically tortured and stripped of all positions before dying in confinement in 1969. Ji Jiang, a counter-revolutionary and survivor of the Cultural Revolution, wrote a memoir, Red Scarf Girl, stating, "We learned to stay silent to survive. The revolution promised equality, but delivered chaos." Censorship became Mao's reaction to dissent. Books labeled counter-revolutionary were burned, classic literature was destroyed, and all art was reduced to propaganda glorifying Mao. Film production ceased for nearly a decade, replaced by a handful of pre-approved model operas. But censorship was not only enforced from above. As confidential interviews with Chinese scholars whose families experienced the Cultural Revolution firsthand reveal, people censored themselves. With no clear boundaries on what was acceptable, people defaulted to obedience. Neighbors turned on one another as a survival reaction to fear, not necessarily because they believed in Maoism.
But what's really at the core of the Cultural Revolution is to put people against each other. If there is any, active censorship mechanism that's created on the side of the state, the exact terms of what is to be censored are kind of creatively created by the people themselves.
This system connects to French philosopher Michel Foucault's theory of power. In his book Discipline and Punish, he explains the idea of the panopticon, a structure where people behave as if they are always being watched, even if no one is actually watching them at that moment. During the Cultural Revolution, surveillance didn't have to be constant to be effective. The possibility of being reported by a classmate, a coworker, or even a family member was enough to control behavior. In that way, Mao's censorship didn't just silence people through punishment, it trained them to silence themselves. In a glimmer of hope, there is some evidence that even under conditions of severe repression, there was still resistance. Qing Hong, a mother, though threatened with verbal and physical abuse, maintained her resolve to protect the family home. While memoirs like Red Scarf Girl document individual experiences, most voices were suppressed. Rural families, factory workers, religious groups, and ethnic minorities left little written evidence. Their stories survive mostly through memory, if they are spoken at all. Even now, there is still no public or official museum accounts or systemic critiques of the Cultural Revolution. It's all passed down orally. Frank Dickhotter, author of The Cultural Revolution, A People's History, told CNN, "The entire history of the Chinese Communist Party revolves around the personality of Mao, which is why the party will never, ever promote a critical examination of its own history."
我觉得如果一个社会它没有面对过自己过去的历史，我很难想象它未来会是什么样的。你都不了解你自己是什么样的性格，然后什么样的这种历史，你将来要做什么事情？
An entire generation learned what not to say. Silence itself became one of the Cultural Revolution's most defining legacies. Though the Cultural Revolution ended in 1976, its legacy still lives on. It reshaped how power is reproduced in China. State censorship combined with widespread self-censorship created a model that still exists today.
So the thing about censorship is like you don't have like a particular clear guideline of what things can be said or can be done. So it's always kind of elusive. Self-censorship in a sense. Just although we want to say what we want to say, but kind of master the strategy of saying things you want to say while remaining safe.
The 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre of pro-democracy protests can be interpreted as an ongoing reaction to the repression of the Cultural Revolution. Historian Roderick McFarquhar explains that the Cultural Revolution traumatized the nation, and its scars remain long after the violence ended. But in China today, the Cultural Revolution is glossed over as a mistake. Discussion of it remains limited, and speaking out against the government is still dangerous.
I didn't learn of it at all during high school. Like we vaguely know that it's like something we shouldn't be talking about, actually. I think that what's so successful about the Chinese censorship program is that it kind of teaches people to know exactly what they're not supposed to know.
The lessons of censorship and repression that the Cultural Revolution instituted actually prevent society from true reform. When people are taught to silence themselves, control is internalized. History does not disappear, but without voices, it cannot be fully told.